Welcome to Africa Media Australia. I'm Clyde Salum Mushradi, and today I've got Margarita Windisch, who's here with us in the studio. Margarita, how are you today?
I'm good.
Margarita, you are part of the Friends of the Victoria University, and you're also a TAFE teacher. Now let's talk about the actual TAFE cuts that we've now been hearing a lot since the latest government has come to power. How are these impacting the whole TAFE system?
Well, look, the 2012 budget that was handed down really announced $300 million cuts to the public TAFE system. These are the biggest cuts ever in the entire history since TAFE has existed.
Wow.
So we are talking a massive, massive shock to the system. So when we're talking just a 300 million in 1 year, this is just for 1 year, and we've got about 18 metropolitan providers. So Victoria University alone, which is the biggest sort of TAFE provider in the western suburbs,
yes,
that's around $40 million a year. That means around 100 teaching jobs alone. It also means some losses of administrative jobs.
Yes.
And it's also meant over 80 courses had to be cut. Student fees are already increasing. And the university will also have to close, different areas in terms of, bookshops and, different amenities. So alone from that, from that perspective, that's already been big. But the broader impact of what that's going to mean in terms of accessibility of people to be able to have skills training is going to be greatly reduced.
Well, this is obviously a pretty serious cut in the system. Now, the government is explaining this by saying that these cuts are necessary to balance the budget. What's your view on that?
Look, the government has said now on a number of occasions that they have actually investing more now into the VET system than the previous government did. What the government is not explaining to the population is that the VET system, which is vocational education and training, is made up of two sectors. One of them is the public sector, which is TAFE, and then you've got the private sector, which are the private providers. Now, the problem we have experienced in the VET sector is actually been with the private providers. That's where the blowout actually happened.
Okay.
Because from 2008 to 2011, the enrollments in the public sector only went up 4%, but in the private sector, 380%. So that's where the blowout occurred. So the government rationale doesn't actually add up. It actually is not logical.
Does that mean that somehow the public system is being punished, so to speak, or impacted negatively because of mismanagement or uncontrollable spending in relation to the private sector?
I think the real agenda is actually privatization. This government did not come up with this policy, though. It was actually a policy by the previous government, the state Labor government, the Brumby government. They actually introduced a policy of opening up the public TAFE sector to private providers. So they started the policy, and really the Baillieu government has just taken it to the logical conclusion, but with the sledgehammer. That's basically what happened. It's actually a policy of privatisation. This is still a big sector that's in public hands, and the government likes privatising things. So what we're seeing is, we're seeing in a way, like you said, the punishment of the public sector, but that's just a smokescreen for actually not wanting to say that we want to actually privatise the entire sector.
And I remember a couple of weeks ago I was talking with a friend who was reading something in the newspaper saying that there's quite a lot of private institutions, educational institutions that have propped up in recent years because they know they get money from the government and try to get the box ticked, but they're not really doing the work that they're supposed to do. Do you agree that is happening?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've had now ample evidence of that from a lot of newspaper reports. The media has shown it, but I've also worked in two private providers before. I've worked in two colleges, and in 2008 one of the colleges actually went bankrupt. hundreds of students were left stranded that had to be absorbed by the system. A lot of staff, were left with, not knowing if we're going to get our superannuation and everything. So, and really working there, I've worked there for a few months, and I was not very proud of working there, to be very honest, because I struggled with keeping my integrity. And the second provider was very similar. The courses, a lot of the courses are substandard. The students pay a lot of money, the taxpayers pay a lot of money, and they offer very, very bad quality education. So it's like the students get really ripped off, but also it's a big issue with the community, because we don't know what kind of service we will get from some of these people who supposedly have these qualifications. So there could be some really potential occupational health and safety issues and everything.
Absolutely. Oh, that's pretty serious. Now, with all this happening, we know western suburbs do actually have a lot of TAFE activity, so to speak. Is that really impacting this area of Melbourne more than any other area, do you think?
I don't know if it's going to be more than any other area, but certainly a very big impact. And the western suburbs, in the sense, are actually impacted quite strongly, because Victoria University has provided very specific courses to new emerging communities. And some of these courses have actually been quite cut. So that's meant now that also, like we said, the cuts were very severe for Victoria University. And now it means also that some of the communities who are reliant on these specific courses are being disadvantaged. We know that some of the rural areas are really suffering with this too. But the West is very specific, because it's got a higher rate of unemployment, it's got a lower rate of tertiary education, higher rate of workers with our qualifications, and quite a high rate of people that have English as their second language. So with this particular situation, we know that the lack of access to TAFE courses will further marginalise our communities out here.
Absolutely, and you can expect that that will have a flow-on effect on a variety of issues, employment and social isolation and all that sort of thing. So looks like these are serious things that need to be looked at.
Look, I think it's very serious, because we know if you don't have access to education, what's going to happen? We know, we do know that, for instance, if you look at the prison population, one of the key sort of factors that is across the prison population is lack of education. We also do know that the government is planning to build a $500 million prison in the western suburbs. So the money is in the budget. So, that's I'm concerned about that. What's going to happen to our young people that are already struggling, maybe they don't have access to education? Is the government, what are we going to do? And then we're going to have a prison out here.
Well, absolutely, these are very serious questions. I had a chance to interview the Premier and ask him that same question, but he responded in saying that he thinks, just like you said earlier, that the government is investing more money. But I guess you've explained that it's not necessarily going into the public sector. Much of it probably could be going into the private sector. And that's something that may need to be looked at. Is that all the old Liberal versus Labor sort of difference, where Liberal tend to, favor the private system? Do you think that is playing as well?
I think there's now a small difference only left between Labor and Liberal on the question of privatisation. I think we've seen now, in terms of attacks on public sector, that's on the whole is a policy that both parties share. Both parties really share a kind of free market outlook in terms of how the country should be running, and that has some big implications and consequences for inclusion in our society. And the TAFE cuts are one of these elements. It brings us to the question, what kind of society do we want to see? A society that is inclusive, where everybody, doesn't matter what our background, gender, ethnicity, ability, can contribute equally to society and can make it a really creative place? are we talking a society where education becomes a privilege for the few, which then means we have a very polarized society, which can create a lot of problems.
A lot of problems, definitely. And that's something that's of great concern for new and emerging communities in general and African communities in particular. Margaret, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I wish I would have another hour or so to continue to talk about this, but unfortunately we are running out of time. I'm sure we will want to have you back here at AMA as soon as possible to continue this quite interesting conversation that I certainly understand our audience will appreciate. For now, we want to say thank you, and we hope to see you again soon at Africa Media Australia.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.